Hey gang, JC here, and this is the Daily Dose for Thursday, June 16th, 2011, a combined venture with Mind Active in beautiful downtown Brentwood. Great television archives, top of the page, eye candy along the bottom, and of course, speaking sexually with Dr. Kathy Naughton. We have an update today, so you can check out. We scour the internet, we scour the earth for stories about couples and hooking up and sex and sexual surveys and all that sort of stuff, and we put that all into our Sexually Speaking thing, which is right below the eye candy feature here at jcontheline.com. What are we going to do about our St. Louis Cardinals? I don't even want to look at what's going on here, and this is very interesting because there's an entire crop of people out there who think that somehow they're being disloyal to the St. Louis National League baseball franchise if they're ever critical of the team, and that's absolutely absurd. It's ridiculous. People have been sitting over lunch counters. Your father and your grandfather sat at a lunch counter or at a bus stop or something like that and argued with other people about how the Cardinals were doing in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and on and on and on. It's one of the most storied traditions in this country's culture to have arguments about your baseball team, about who's playing well, who you not think is playing well, who should do this, who should do that, this guy should be fired, this guy should be sent down, this guy's a bum. And for some reason, with the advent of the internet and stuff like that, people are trying to shout down people when there's legitimate criticism. Somebody's saying, I don't like the way that guy looks. We're talking about people who are underperforming. We're talking about people who are not doing their jobs. We're talking, in some cases, about coaches that are not teaching fundamentals. I've been all over Colby Rasmus, and I think for good reason. Now this whole thing, this sloppy baseball, and you can't blame everything on the absence of Matt Holliday and David Freese. Every team has got somebody either playing hurt or on the DL. So, at the end of the day, almost all things tend to be equal in that regard. And you have to go into a Major League Baseball season assuming that people are going to go down from time to time. So, these arguments against this business, you can't criticize the Cardinals, or you're being disloyal, or you're not being a true member of Cardinal Nation. I had a guy say to me in an email, goes, all they do is win. Oh yeah, take a look at the last week. This sloppy play and lack of fundamentals is catching up with this baseball team. And now, we've got Kansas City coming in, and you know what Kansas City did to the Cardinals in KC a couple of weeks ago, and now we're here, and it's going to be hotter than hell this weekend, and here we go again. By the way, speaking of local athletes, what local athlete has a downtown restaurant that I was going to go to last night and then changed my mind based on the comments from a handful of listeners and a whole lot of other people who I ran into yesterday who said, oh, I heard you're going to go there. Guess what? Avoid it like the plague. It's awful. It's overpriced. The food is not that it's not good. It's that it's terrible. And they don't seem to be interested in fixing it. What downtown restaurant is JC talking about? And I like the person whose restaurant this is, but there's something going on here. There's something wrong, and they better fix it because they are asking for big trouble, unless, of course, it's an intentional tax write-off, and you never know. All right, let's get right to the news. Justin Timberlake, as we told you yesterday, says he smokes pot. Like, that's not obvious, because anybody who can look at Jessica Biel's ass and then walk away and say, yeah, there's got to be something better than that. There's got to be high on something. Madonna will go into the studio next month to begin work on a new album. The album will also allow people to get a sneak peek at what Lady Gaga is going to sound like in 2036. Kim Kardashian released her wedding registry. They're asking for $192,000 worth of stuff. What do you get someone who has everything and deserves none of it? Natalie Portman gave birth to a son. Doctors say the delivery was complicated considering Mila Kunis's head was in the way. Black Swan, okay. And new data shows that the number of births in the United States has decreased for 3 straight years. I'll take care of that, said Arnold Schwarzenegger. Reese Witherspoon owns 2 miniature donkeys. And the neighbors are being very, very annoyed by these stupid things making all that hee-haw noise all the time. She's apparently very well liked in the neighborhood, but according to one neighbor, all we want her to do is shut her asses up. Remember David Tyree? He's the guy who made the amazing catch against his helmet in Super Bowl 42 back in 2008, ran like with the ball pressed against his helmet before he could sort of like, finally get control of it, keeping the Giants in the game and allowing them to upset the undefeated New England Patriots 17-14. Well, he's a massive bigot. In an interview with an anti-gay marriage group called the National Organization for Marriage, Tyree says that same-sex unions will lead to anarchy. Those are his words. Tyree adds that a two-dad family would be especially hard on a daughter. Quote, "You can't teach something that you don't have, so two men will never be able to show a woman how to be a woman." Then Tyree adds, how can marriage be marriage for thousands of years and now all of a sudden, because of a minority, an influential minority, they have a push and they have an agenda, and it totally reshapes something that was not founded in our country. Apparently David Tyree has never studied history, geology, more history, animal husbandry. There's been homosexuality in the world since day one, even in the animal community. What a frickin' moron. All right, there's enough people that have trouble flying as it is. They are just sort of numbed by the sheer terror of getting into a long tube and being thrust into the atmosphere at 600 miles an hour or however fast planes fly, and then at 35,000 feet. It just scares the bejesus out of people. There are some people who are just numbingly afraid, and like John Madden, who refuses to fly. There are other people who just sort of drug themselves up so that they can make it through a flight because it's impractical not to fly. There are other people who are just sort of nervous and uncomfortable about it, but they just sort of get through it. They don't say anything. They just sort of get through it. And then there's other people like me. I'd get on a plane. I'd fall asleep. I'd sleep through the takeoff and wake up usually from the noise when they would have meal service, and you would hear, silverware clanking and things like that. That was back in the days when they actually had food service and stuff like that. But that's me. I'll just I could fall asleep laying on a picket fence, and a plane doesn't bother me. That having been said, I heard these guys on Frank Opinion show yesterday on the Big 550 KTRS, and of course Trish and I are on every day now from noon until 3, followed by Frank. And they were talking about the Airbus. Airbus is one of the manufacturing companies. They make these giant, 747s and 737s and all that sort of stuff. And apparently, somebody has had the bright idea to make a clear plane. And when I say clear, I'm talking about you would get onto this plane and you would sit there and you would see the sky, the atmosphere. You wouldn't be looking out windows to see what was going on. You'd be sitting there in a clear plane, being able to look out and see everything. Now, let me just tell you a couple of things about that. Even at the Hancock Building in Chicago, they have an observation deck. You can sort of stand there and you go out there in the Sears Tower, and it's sort of like you're standing in thin air because the thing juts out from the building and you're standing there. Then, of course, at the Grand Canyon, and I was there a couple of years ago, and it was like a 6-hour drive from the South Rim, which is where everybody goes. That's the best observation point. They're like, oh yeah, that thing's way up there, like part of an Indian reservation or something like that. And so we didn't make it. But it's this thing you probably heard about. It's a clear, like plexiglass thing that shoots out, I don't know, something like 75 feet over the Grand Canyon, and you stand there and you look down, and it's supposedly amazing, but some people really freak out. By the way, don't get sucked into that because it's real expensive. It's something like $75, and you can't bring anything out there. They don't even let you bring a camera. You have to basically empty your pockets. You can't take anything with you out onto this observation deck of the Grand Canyon because I guess they're afraid that people will throw things into the canyon, and they consider that sacrilegious, and at least I understand that. But the idea that you can't even bring a camera seems ridiculous. And you pay all that money, and it's so out of the way, and people don't sort of understand that. If you've never been to the Grand Canyon, you gotta go. It's a life-altering experience to see that hole in the ground. It really will change your life. One of my all-time favorite movies is Grand Canyon with Danny Glover and Kevin Kline and a bunch of other really good people. So, anyhow, that having been said, a clear plane. So you're sitting there and you take off and you just be able to look out, and it would almost be like being outside, like being on a roller coaster or something, except you're going into the air. I don't know about this idea. It's very, very intriguing to think about, but in the final analysis, I'm not sure anybody wants it. Like a small handful of people that would get off of this, I think it would scare the hell out of people. What if you build a goddamn thing and then nobody gets on it because they're too afraid? All right, Green Lantern hits theaters tomorrow. Ryan Reynolds, Blake Lively, and a bunch of other people. Peter Sarsgaard plays the villain. Angela Bassett, Tim Robbins. Speaking of movies and superhero movies, people will remember back in 1978, Marlon Brando was only in the Superman movie for a couple of minutes, and they paid him $3.7 million, apparently. Russell Crowe is going to be the latest guy to play Superman's dad. Kevin Costner will play his Earth dad, Diane Lane his Earth mom, Amy Adams, Lois Lane, and here we go with another Superman movie. Gary Busey got kicked off a movie called Mansion of Blood. He was bothering people, saying inappropriate things to some of the female cast members, and he gone. Scotty McCreery, the American Idol kids will be here in about, what is it? It is the 16th, so they're going to be here in a little less than 2 weeks. And Scotty McCreery, the guy who won, said he wants to distance himself from American Idol. That just cracks me up. They have American Idol to thank for every shred, every molecule of fame or success or money that they have. And when they win, the first thing they start saying is, I don't really want to be known for American Idol. Book of Mormon soundtrack got a huge bump from the Tony Awards the other night. It won 9 of them, by the way, and that shot the soundtrack album up to number 3 on the Billboard chart. That's the first time that a Broadway soundtrack has cracked the top 10 in over 40 years. The last one was Hair in 1969. Rolling Stone released a poll result. They said, what's the best album covers of all time? Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Beatles from 1967 was number 1. Dark Side of the Moon 2. Nirvana, Nevermind at number 3. Abbey Road at 4. London Calling, The Clash at number 5. Sticky Fingers, Revolver, Born to Run, Wish You Were Here, and a Velvet Underground thing made it as number 10. 8 of the 10 albums were released between 65 and 75. And what about the Charlie Lines album? And what about Blind Faith? This is just too perfect. In a study, researchers hooked up a device to men's junk to monitor their arousal during heterosexual porn. What happened? Go check out Speaking Sexually, Dr. Kathy Naughton, Center for Sexual Health. We have that story for you today. In Virginia, 2 men got into a fight over a woman. One pulled out a chainsaw, and the other one pulled out a baseball bat. Think about that for a minute. Just ponder it and say, who would win a fight between a guy with a baseball bat and a chainsaw? Who would win? I'll have that story coming up, as they say on TV. It was on this date in 1969, speaking of Superman, that George Reeves was found shot to death in his home, but no one can agree on whether or not he killed himself or it was murder. There's a couple of those true Hollywood-y story things. And some people say he was messing around with one of the studio head's wives. Other people just said it was a suicide because he thought he was Superman and he cracked up. Something like that. I'm not really sure. Obviously, we're never going to know, but it's an interesting story. All right, the guy with the baseball bat won. So, for what it's worth. All right, JC's Eye Candy today. All the way back to the summer of 1980, I was working in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and all the radio stations back then would put what they called these little hot sheets or tip sheets in the music stores. You probably remember they were like a little thing that had the top albums listed, and you had a picture of one of your favorite radio personalities on it and everything like that. I found one from 1980 when I was working at 97 FM, a rock station in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. You see my picture and a couple of other cool things from 31 years ago. I had to go deep into my archives for that, but enjoy that. That's on Eye Candy right below what you're looking at right now. All right, we're on the Big 550 KTRS every day from noon till 3. That's me and Trish Gazelle. We're at Swing Around Funtown today, Thursday, and we'll have another one for you tomorrow before we break for the weekend. We update every day here at jcontheline.com. That's it, JC's Daily Dose for Thursday, June 16th, 2011, a combined venture with Mind Active in beautiful downtown Brentwood. In the meantime, we've beaten this one to death. Have a good one. See you later. Bye.